now. A View exclusive. Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton is live with her view on everything from the deep divisions over the Israel-Hamas war.
Israel has a right and a responsibility to defend itself.
The cries of the Palestinian and Israeli children sound no different to me. What I don't understand is why the cries of Palestinians sound different to you all.
To the key issues that made for big wins in yesterday's election.
It was a victory that sends a loud, clear message. Candidates should run for something and not against someone.
Plus, sharing her personal mission to break the silence on a healthcare crisis that's impacting millions of women right now. Then, growing pains. How the American dream is getting a reality check from millennials and Gen Z that's keeping them from buying a home, starting a family, and excelling at the office. Here come Hot Topics with Whoopi, Sarah Haynes, Anna Navarro, Joy Behar, Sunny Hostin, and Alyssa Farah Griffin. Now, let's get things started.
Since we're dealing with hot topics like the Israel-Hamas war, whether it's yesterday's election results changed the conversation about the presidential race, we need some insight from a pro who has been through all this before. Please welcome back the former Secretary of State, the amazing Hillary Clinton.
To have you back.
It's really great being here. Wow, and what an amazing audience.
Yeah. You can tell we're trying to keep you for the whole show. They're just Hillary, more Hillary.
Hillary my calendar. I'm here.
Well, yesterday was Election Day, and it was a huge win for Democrats, especially in Ohio, Kentucky, Virginia, with voters sending a clear message on abortion rights. Mm-hmm. What was your takeaway?
Exactly that. The election yesterday across the country showed a couple of things. One, that women are standing up for themselves and they're voting for their rights. And we have enough good men who are coming along with us. And we're winning a lot of important races. And secondly, that people are moving away from extremism. You know, they want to have leaders who are trying to do the best they can to take care of our real problems, not make up stuff and cause all kinds of commotion. And it's kind of like getting back to the real business of governing. I thought that Governor Beshear, a Democrat in Kentucky, who has been a very good, solid governor, but also ran on abortion, had one of the best ads of the entire campaign about a young woman who'd been raped and who said, you know, this should be my decision. So he went right into it. He also ran on red flag laws, that if you know somebody is dangerous, they should not be able to buy a gun. We ought to know that by now. And so I had a really good feeling about the election yesterday.
You did?
Yeah.
Well, we're very
very lucky to have you now, following yesterday's results, but also 1 year out from the presidential election. So last night unequivocally had some major wins for Democrats. Abortion is hands down an incredibly motivating issue, but there are a number of polls out there that spell real trouble for President Biden. I'm curious if there's a disconnect between perhaps the brand of the Democratic Party and President Biden. And I think one thing you and I agree on is Donald Trump is an existential threat to this country. But is Joe Biden, when 4 out of 5 battleground polls have him losing to Trump, the best person to take him on?
Yes, he is. And he's done a really good job as president. And, you know, I like to evaluate people in public life on what have they gotten done for us. And, you know, you look at his record, despite all of the odds, he's really produced positive results. But more than that, we are a year out. And if you go back and look at comparable presidencies, Barack Obama was behind at this point in his reelection. My husband was behind at this point in his reelection. You know, until the candidates, the nominees are actually chosen, people are always saying, well, maybe there's somebody better out there. Let me look over here. You know, oh, I see somebody I like, or I just saw, you know, him give a speech or her position. That's natural. But what I think is important is that, as you say, Alyssa, that Joe Biden is not only proved that he's done a good job, but look at the alternative and look at what we would face as a country. And I think the election results yesterday should be very good news for President Biden.
Yes.
And I certainly see it that way.
I hope so. So, you know, this country has a lot of problems. And the main one is named Donald Trump. Okay, I can't personally believe that this loser has so many people who still think that he could make a decent president. He's been criminally charged with 91 counts. I mean, he's practically got one foot in jail and another one on a banana peel, this guy. And they still say, oh, we still like him. What do you make of that?
Oh, I don't know, Joy. Didn't you just write a play about this? You know,
by the way, you know, Mrs. Clinton did win the popular vote.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I continue to believe that you won. I don't care what they say.
You know, but look, I think you're absolutely right to sound the alarm. And what I think, again, we saw yesterday is that a lot of people may not be telling pollsters they're reconsidering, but they are reconsidering.
Oh, you think so?
I do. I think that the chaos that comes with him is just not attractive to a majority of people anymore. But look, there are people who still, you know, support him. They say they're going to vote for him. We just have to limit the number of those people and reach out to those who are having second thoughts, who say, well, you know, I thought he would have done better, or how much longer is he going to do this rigged election thing, or look at all the problems he's got in the court system. So I think we have to keep reaching out to the people who are open to looking at the damage that he would cause if he were ever anywhere near the White House
I mean,
again.
it costs a lot. I think that we should lock him up now.
Well, some of the polls reflect that voters, that if he is convicted, voters will change their opinion about him and won't vote for him.
That's
so
right.
even the ones who are supporting him now.
Exactly. So I trust that our country is
Why do you
smart
think,
enough
I'm
not
just
to
curious,
do that.
why do you think that's true? Just because he's convicted, they don't believe anything now. Why would they believe
There
that?
are some that will change their vote.
That is exactly what these polls have shown. You know, I think when you are, look, it's any kind of relationship. When you're 100% committed, it's really hard to say you were wrong.
Yeah.
Yes,
You know,
that's
people
true.
go, why are you still with this guy? And you're just like, well, you know, I thought he would do this, or I liked what he did there. And it's hard for people to separate. And I did say, and I believe this, and there are a lot of other people, not just me, saying this. Liz Cheney said it recently, that there's a kind of cult-like dimension
Yes.
here.
Yeah.
You know, he's like a walking id. You know, in psychology, you've got the ego and the superego and the id. And so a lot of people go, oh, man, did you hear what he said? It's like watching a constant entertainment show. And so people get hooked into that, and they don't want to give it up because it is, you know, kind of entertaining and interesting.
To watch the chaos.
Well,
I think that your loss to Trump in 2016 will go down in history as one of the most pivotal times in our country, one of the most pivotal moments in our country. And it's still reeling from, you know, Trump's policies, I think, and the deep divisions that he sowed in this country. What happen if he were to be reelected?
Oh, I can't even think that, because I think it would be the end of our country as we know it. And I don't say that lightly. You know, I hated losing, and I especially hated losing to him because I had seen so many warning signals during the campaign. But I immediately said, look, we have to give him a chance. We've got to support, you know, the president we have. And I meant it. And I tried really hard. And then literally from his inauguration on, it was nothing but, you know, accusing people of things, making up facts, denying the size of the crowd at his own inauguration. And everything that I worried about, I saw unfolding. And so I think that he'd be even worse now because he was somewhat restrained, believe it or not, in the first term by people who he hired because he thought they would go along with him, and they stood up to him. And so now he is going to, if he were ever near the Oval Office again, find people who have no principles, no conscience, who are totally tied, you know, to his fortunes, literally, and therefore would do whatever he said. And so the wreckage is almost unimaginable. You know, when I was Secretary of State, I used to talk about one and done. And what I meant by that is that people would get legitimately elected, and then they would try to do away with elections and do away with opposition and do away with a free press. And you could see it in countries where, well, Hitler was duly elected. That's right. Right? And so all of a sudden, somebody with those tendencies, those dictatorial, authoritarian tendencies, would be like, oh, okay, we're going to shut this down. We're going to throw these people in jail. And they didn't usually telegraph that. Trump is telling us what he intends to do.
We need to listen to
Take him at his word. The man means to throw people in jail who disagree with him, shut down legitimate press outlets, do what he can to literally undermine the rule of law and our country's values.
He would use the military to stop protesters.
He's going to do it. He's not going to do a whole bunch of stuff right now. Not right now. Well, no, not right yet. But we'll find out what more we think can go on when we come back. So we are back with former Secretary of State, the fabulous Hillary Clinton.
What I was saying before, I just want to throw this in.
Let me get Alyssa in, please.
But I have to correct something.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah, because I don't want the impression to be made that I didn't accept the results of the Trump administration to win. But I don't like the Electoral College.
Yeah.
And you won the popular vote, you won the Electoral College. And that's the thing that needs to be addressed.
Because it's based,
not one person, one
it's based
vote.
on slavery.
Yeah, and I think it's un-American.
Yeah,
That's all.
I certainly agree with that.
Yeah, I know.
Well, Madam Secretary, I did want to comment on one thing you were mentioning about the former president is he also in a second term wouldn't be bound by re-election. So a lot of times what we saw in the former White House was folks saying, you can't do that. You've got to win independents. You've got to win moderates. That will not exist. So the guardrails that come down are very dangerous. But another incredibly important issue, you have decades of foreign policy experience. The world's watching what's happening in Israel and Gaza. Our hearts break. You said something that I thought was incredibly important and needed to be said at this time, which is those calling for a ceasefire don't understand Hamas. Can you explain that? Because I know there is a deep passion and compassion for the Palestinian people and their suffering, but there is this entity there that is so dangerous.
Well, Alyssa, you're absolutely right. And, you know, I feel so personally committed to trying to figure out how to help the Israelis and the Palestinians live in peace. And I negotiated a ceasefire in November of 2012, so I understand what it takes to try to stop violence. But remember, there was a ceasefire on October 6th that Hamas broke by their barbaric assault on peaceful civilians, and their kidnapping, their killing, their beheading, their terrible, inhumane savagery. There was a ceasefire. It did not hold because Hamas chose to break it. So you have to keep several things in your head at the same time, and that is, number one, Hamas is a terrorist organization. It has made very clear it is committed to the elimination of the state of Israel, and it has consistently broken ceasefires over a number of years. Israel has a right to defend itself, as any country would. Ukraine has a right to defend itself against an invasion, an unlawful, inhumane invasion by Russia. And Israel should conduct itself by the laws of war and do everything it can to prevent and limit civilian casualties. Those three things are all true themselves. And so when I said a couple of weeks ago that it wasn't time for a ceasefire because it would enable Hamas to rearm and reposition, because I've been to Gaza, and Gaza is a highly populated urban environment. And what has been going on now for a number of years under Hamas rule is the building of over 200 miles of tunnels under Gaza, the storing of munitions, all kinds of explosives under hospitals, under refugee camps, under civilian targets, the use of civilians as really just tools of war by Hamas. That has all been going on. And so when I said you could not have a ceasefire, people didn't understand that Hamas would use it for their own purposes. I think we're now moving toward a position where the idea of these humanitarian pauses that the Biden administration has been promoting are now, I think, on the table and should be. And what would that mean? Well, first of all, let's remember over 240 innocent people, not just Israelis, people from other countries. The second biggest number of people taken by Hamas are workers from Thailand who are working in agriculture. So this is a multinational hostage situation. A humanitarian pause would enable two things to happen if Hamas would agree, and that is let the hostages go. Yeah. These are innocent civilian people. They should not be held as, captives to Hamas. And let in more humanitarian aid that actually gets where it's intended, not into the hands of Hamas. So if we work on all of that, I think it's possible, given where the current situation is, because the Israelis are now in Gaza with ground troops. They have cut off the north from the south. They have surrounded Gaza City, which is the central command structure of the Hamas militants. So I think now would be a good time to consider doing that. But a ceasefire done prematurely benefits those who do not abide by any laws, by any rules, by any human, character value about the value of life. So that was not, it was much too premature. Now I think the pauses should be considered.
Right. Well, let me ask you this, because the ceasefire option, or at least the humanitarian pauses, is a very popular concept, not only in this country, but around the world, because we're seeing the death of at least 10,000 innocent Palestinian civilians, and half of those are children. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So former President Obama said, quote, and collective punishment is against international human rights law. So former President Obama said, quote, if you want to solve the problem, then you have to take in the whole truth. Mm-hmm. And you then have to admit nobody's hands are clean here, that all of us are complicit to some degree. Is that, in your view, a wake-up call for Democrats? A lot of the international community agrees with him. Do you agree that the Israeli government, as well as the U.S., are part of the problem as well?
Well, I think that the problem predates October 7th, and I think that's what President Obama was talking about, because let's remember, this is a very long and complicated history. Yeah. Mm-hmm. My husband, with the Israeli government at the time in 2000, offered a Palestinian state to the Palestinians at that time, run by Arafat, Yasser Arafat,
and the PLO.
And the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which, by the way, took out of its charter violence against Israel. Mm-hmm. So you got to separate the Palestinians who believe that there is some future of peace with Hamas, which believes it has to destroy Israel. Yeah. Those are two different organizations, and they have to be viewed in that way. Arafat turned that down. there would have been a Palestinian state now for 23 years if he had not walked away from it. There was another attempt when I was Secretary of State to try to, bring the Palestinians and the Israelis together. That didn't work out. Israel left Gaza in 2005 and forcibly ejected 50,000 Israelis who were living in Gaza. They left all of their infrastructure. They had a big infrastructure of greenhouses where they were supplying fruits, vegetables, flowers, etc. And the Palestinians deserved to have a productive, successful economy in Gaza. Hamas came in and basically destroyed all of that and killed a lot of other Palestinians. So I think when President Obama says that, it requires us to look at the history. And of course, history holds all of us accountable. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that is a fair statement. But today we have to look at where we are. And I believe it's imperative, since we have had numerous ceasefires with Hamas, all of which they have violated, to try finally to dislodge Hamas and allow the Palestinians to have other leadership that will actually once again work for a two-state solution, which it should be the outcome that we all hope and pray for. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's what's funny. The biggest deal when I think about all of this is, I think about Anwar Sadat. For me, he was a beacon. If you don't know who he was, look him up. He was somebody who felt that there was a better way for everybody to exist in Israel.
Well, but can I say something?
Yes,
because that's a really important point. So, Israel and Egypt fought wars. That's part of this complex history that people need to educate ourselves about. And after fighting wars, Sadat went to Israel and made peace with the then current Israeli government. And that ended. That's why you see the current Egyptian government working to try to get supplies into Gaza, to try to get civilians and foreign nationals and wounded people out of Gaza. So there's a working relationship now between Egypt and Israel. Jordan and Israel made a peace agreement. I was there to see that happen. So people should not get hopeless. There is hope, but you have to remove from the scene terrorists like Hamas who don't believe in peace. They don't believe in it for their own people. They're using their own people as shields, and they don't believe that it's possible to do with Israel. Let's try to have people who can lead us to peace.
Yes. We'll be right back. Hillary Clinton, who's joined by the director of a documentary that Hillary Clinton is executive producing called Below the Belt. And the film exposes how more than 6 million women living with endometriosis are forced to navigate roadblocks and dead ends in our healthcare system that keeping them from getting vital treatment. Take a look.
Look, he even says, look, these listed providers perform endometrial ablation surgery.
But you called and they don't. Right?
No, we petitioned for excision.
Oh, right. It's not even the right surgery.
No.
Wow.
There's another thing for grievances and appeals again.
Really?
Yeah.
So
I'm not doing this right now.
Please welcome the director of Below the Belt, Shannon Cohn.
So, Shannon, this documentary follows the story, a years-long search for the effective treatment for endometriosis. I'm following 4 different stories. This is really common when you're dealing with this particular thing, and it's personal to you because you also suffer from endometriosis. Can you tell everyone what the disease is and why doctors just don't seem to have answers?
Well, let's see, where do I start? So endometriosis is arguably the most common devastating disease that most people have never heard of. It affects 6 million people in the U.S., 200 million people worldwide estimated. Yet it takes an average of 8 doctors 10 years to diagnose, which is kind of outrageous when you're talking about a condition that affects so many girls and women, and yet it takes that long young to even hear the word endometriosis. I first had symptoms at 16, yet I didn't hear the word until 13 years later. So this is after, multiple test procedures at the best, doctors, the best, medical centers in the country. And I was told things as a teenager like, it's part of being a woman, or it's in my head, or my favorite was I was trying to get attention. And I remember thinking at 16, like, these people are out of their minds. I'm 16, I know how to get attention, and I would not be complaining about this, to get attention. And it was very confusing as a teenager to be told something. Now we know the term is called gaslighting, but it's very confusing as a teen to be told something about your own body that you know is not true.
From a trusted professional, that's really hard.
Well, the documentary is fantastic. I learned so much. I thought I knew a lot about this, and I learned so much. What's fascinating also from the clip, the black woman there is a nurse, and she is still having trouble accessing health care. Now, you really feel for these women as you see them go from doctor to doctor, from appointment to appointment, because it can be debilitating. Some of them are, in such incredible pain. Some women feel that they aren't heard or believed, and they're even, the men that come with them are believed more. And that's why they bring men with them sometimes. So what do you think that it's about?
Well, I think that they are right. They're not being believed. I think that they think that because it's true. I hear that all around the world as we screen this film. Every continent. I mean, it's the same experience. Educated women, skilled workers. It doesn't matter who they are, what their socioeconomic status is, what their race is, what their nationality is, what their age is. They are coming away from doctors' visits feeling like they're not being taken seriously for their symptoms.
And that's not new with endometriosis. The way that women's both physical and mental health has been treated for a very long time is to dismiss, is to underestimate, is to gaslight, as Shannon said. And the result is that for, I don't know how many generations, hundreds of years, maybe the millennial, women didn't know what to believe themselves. I mean, if you are having acute pain, which endometriosis causes, and you try to tell people and they say it's in your head, or it's because you have your period, or, that women go through this, don't worry about it. And it goes on for years. Clearly, there's a huge disconnect between how not just the medical profession, but society sees women's pain and how the reality of it is lived out in our lives. That's why I was so proud to be associated with this film.
It drives me berserk that we are still constantly having to beg for health care. We pay taxes, women pay taxes. I don't understand why when doctors go to school forever, they're not taught about a woman's body. And then you have all of these people making these comments, and you have no idea how this works. And for me, I had it once, and I was lucky. I was lucky enough because I had a urinary tract infection that I did not take care of. Note to people, don't let that stuff go, because stuff happens in your body, and I ended up with what looked like, and I don't mean to gross you out, but suddenly there was a smell, and it looked like cottage cheese, and I didn't know what was going on. I was lucky enough to get to somebody who said, this is called endometriosis, and they were able to treat me with antibiotics. But that's because somebody knew what they were looking at. When I saw this documentary and I heard that fact that it takes them 6 to 10 years to even get the diagnosis, I don't understand that. What are they doing in medical school?
30 doctors.
Well, part of the problem is funding, because a bipartisan effort is working to secure more funding right now for endometriosis research. There isn't enough money, but what needs to get done, and what do you hope people take away from this documentary?
Yes, well, just as a fact, basically in medical school, medical students are taught 1 hour in endometriosis, a condition that affects the same percentage of women that have diabetes.
So is that why they also don't believe when we have severe cramps, because they got only 1 hour?
Well, I think that it's just been undervalued. for so long, and that translates into research funding as well. Like, we have a historical tradition of undervaluing women's research in this country. It's not just, endometriosis is a perfect awful storm of so many things. Menstrual taboo, gender bias in medicine, racial bias in medicine, financial barriers to care, institutional barriers to care. You're seeing all of those things play out through the lens of a single condition that affects 200 million people. Yet, the answer isn't also, it's not just one thing. But yes, research funding is a great place to start. And we're taking a very proactive stance. Like, we have made the film, and I'm also an attorney and a social impact producer. So we're using this film as a catalyzing tool for meaningful, practical change. We have screened the film in medical schools around the country, starting at Harvard. And then beyond that, working, yes, in a bipartisan way to garner more research funding.
Listen, this is important for all of us to know. Pay attention to this. First of all, thanks to Hillary Clinton and Shannon Cohn. Below the Belt, the last health taboo is currently available for streaming on PBS Passport. PBS Passport. Check it out. Please do, because you may discover that you're suffering from something and you didn't even realize it was happening. And we will be right back. Millennials and Gen Z have a much different view of the American dream than past generations. Data shows that soaring inflation, student debt, and limited room for advancement in the workplace has made them feel that milestones like affording a home, starting a family, excelling within the corporate structure are out of reach. Does every generation feel this way at some point? I say yes. What do you think?
Well, since we're sticking with our Clinton theme today, it's the economy, stupid. Like, my generation is the generation of the housing crisis, the financial crisis, 9/11. We've been in war basically my entire generation. You've got 45% of people ages 18 to 29 living with their parents. Our American dream's different. Doesn't mean other struggles didn't matter, but on the having kids specifically, I get it. Most of my friends, if they're not, married by a certain age, they're not owning homes at the same rate, and you don't want to have kids if you don't feel like you can provide that. My one piece of advice, though, to millennials who are holding off having kids because of the finances, if you're in a position, which is also expensive, consider freezing your eggs, because you could change that position later and want to. But no, it's hard. It is a very real struggle out there.
I think it's refreshing to see people enter parenthood so soberly, because I think for generations since the beginning of time, people get married, they just have babies because they're supposed to, and this is what we do. And then you see people like gay couples who fight so hard just to love a baby, and every day people are having kids that some are beaten and like not taken care of. And so to have a generation that says, I don't know if I can give them the life they deserve, I don't know if I'm capable of being a whole person and doing this, I say bravo, because it is not a slight undertaking.
That was my takeaway. My generation, you got married, you tried to get a house, and you had kids. And this seems to be very intentional. They're thinking about it. And I agree with you, though.
Millennials are brilliant.
Your eggs start turning to dust. And so you have to be careful. And so if you're a young person and you have any kind of chance of freezing your eggs, which wasn't available to me when I was, your age, I think that you got to at least preserve the opportunity, because you may change your mind.
Well, I'm sorry.
She said one kid is enough. Yeah,
well, but listen. Every generation comes and wants to do better than their parents did. Every generation. But I'm sorry. If you only want to work 4 hours, it's going to be harder for you to get a house.
Oh, and don't mention 4 days.
I feel for everybody that feels this, but I'm sorry. We busted our behinds. We had to bust our behinds because we didn't have the option of going back.
Y'all gave us the housing crisis, though.
Listen, we had all kinds of stuff.
No, it's true, but the one thing I'd say is millennials are statistically the first generation that's likely to do worse off than their parents.
You know what? That's what they said to us as well. Every generation is told you're going to do worse than your parents. And you know what? People pick it up and they do what they do, and they raise themselves, and this is what you got to do. It's called being a good citizen. We'll be right back. Welcome back, Joy. You brought up something on the commercial break about the ideal family size.
Yes, I did, Whoopi. Thank you. I read that just 3% of Americans consider one child to be an only child to be the ideal family. Only 3%. I object to that.
I object also.
I mean, the only reason to have sibling, in my opinion,
Tell me, Joy.
is like so that both of you understand how crazy the parents were. You were like a witness
That's important,
to how
yeah.
nuts the parents were.
And that you have help also when your parents get older.
Yes, that's true.
Like some help. But we're both only children.
Yes.
I rather enjoyed it,
shows.
actually.
I'm kidding.
I rather enjoyed it.
You know, as an only child, I've been here for 27 years. I get along with my siblings.
You do.
A lot of girls who've been here through the years, they had sisters and brothers. They didn't get along that great.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying.
I mean, look at Sarah. She's like the sister I never asked for. I didn't.
You would never give back.
Anyway, I just think it's okay. 44% think 2 is ideal. 29% think 3 children.
I'm in there.
That's you.
You're
Would be
outnumbered.
ideal.
I
said
wanted
2,
4
but I'm
because
not-
I was one of 4, and then I tried to be thoughtful about when I would be capable as a parent.
Yes.
And I felt very stretched.
And you're
it would be
outnumbered
unfair.
when you have 3.
I didn't even think of the
Yeah, they
basketball
can
team.
take over and run the place.
I stuck with 2 because I didn't want to be outnumbered.
And regarding
But you got like 100 animals, so you are outnumbered.
And regarding this millennial thing, that they have a problem, I grew up with the nuclear bomb hanging on my head. And we thought we were going to go up in an atomic war any minute now.
Yeah.
And then we went through Vietnam, and then World War II, of course. My generation, my father, my uncles, they all went to war. People would be home waiting, hope, praying that notice would not come,
Right.
that their child was
No, I
killed.
can see that, and we were talking about this offline. You guys actually had it harder generationally. We are better off. It's the economic conditions that are tough, but we have
They've
more
always been
rights
tough, and they haven't raised the minimum wage in 14
That's what they
years.
need to do.
$7.25.
It needs
No
to
one
be
can
at least
live on that.
15. I don't know. I think that what we should.
Saturn swings like a lucky swing. In the cosmic quiet where dreams take wing. Nebulous weave tales untold. In this celestial soothing our story unfold. Moonlight bathes us in the soft kiss. In the cosmic light we fast. A symphony of kinds, celestial fair. Celestial soothing, love in the air. Celestial, soothing a gentle refrain. In the cosmic silence, our hearts remain. Notes of stardust, the silhouette.